Chapter 43. Islam makes its mark on Arabia. It is in the nature of things that when a new religion or a new comprehensive ideology is preached, only a small number of people respond to it at the initial stage. There are those who are endowed with the type of insight which helps them identify the evil in the life of their society and discern the benefits which the new religion is bound to give. Also, few are those who actively oppose the new religion. They are normally the people who fear for their vested interests as a result of the spread of the new faith. They are, however, able to recruit for such opposition the people who are immediately under their control or follow their lead. The majority of people remain neutral. They prefer to adopt an attitude of wait and see. They do not like to jeopardize their relations with either camp. Before the advent of Islam, all Arabian tribes acknowledged that the Quraysh enjoyed the highest position of honor and authority in Arabia. When they saw the Quraysh taking a position of active hostility towards Islam, the faith preached by the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, all Arabian tribes, with the exception of the Aus and the Khazraj in Medina, either joined the Quraysh in their hostility to the new faith or remained neutral. This last group of neutral tribes did not even bother to examine the faith of Islam. The merits of the cause did not matter to them. They did not feel that there was anything wrong with the way they lived that should be changed by Islam. Nor did they aspire to play any important role in improving the quality of human life in order to embrace the cause of Islam. They simply adopted an attitude of wait and see. Should Islam triumph, they were prepared to think seriously about joining its camp. If it were to be defeated, they would have taken appropriate precautions to remain in the Quraysh's good books. After returning from the expedition of Tabuk, the Prophet sent his closest companion, Abu Bakr, to lead the pilgrimage and his cousin Ali to claim total and religious authority over Makkah, so that no unbeliever was able to offer pilgrimage according to the old practices of ignorance. The time had come for all Arabian tribes to realize that there was no longer any power in Arabia to challenge the authority of the Islamic State in Medina. Even the last of the major Arab tribes, the Thaqif, had given up the struggle against the tide of Islam. They were now followers of the Prophet. Hence, it was only to be expected that the Arabian tribes should start to review their position. Delegations followed one another to Medina, either to inquire about the essential elements of the faith of Islam or to pledge their loyalty to the Prophet and declare their belief in God's oneness and the message of Muhammad, peace be upon him. There were, however, certain delegations which had some other purposes. Only the visits of delegations which had a special significance in one way or another will be described here. A drive for power. One of the earliest delegations to arrive in Medina was that of the tribe of Amir. This delegation included two men who did not have the smallest particle of faith, Amir ibn al-Tufail and Arbad ibn Qais. The latter was famous all over Arabia for his physical power and fearlessness. The rest of the delegation realized that Amir ibn al-Tufail did not harbor any good intentions towards the Prophet. Some of them tried to counsel him against doing anything foolish. They told him that the majority of the Arabs were now Muslims. It was only wise and expedient that their own tribe should follow suit. Amir said to those who gave him that advice, "I have pledged to myself that I will not stop until I have forced the Arabs to accept my authority. Would I now be the one to accept the authority of this man from the Quraysh?" The rest of the delegation had a different attitude. When they met the Prophet, they said to him, "You are our master and the one who has power over us." The Prophet said, "Watch what you say and do not let Satan fool you. The master is God." By this, the Prophet meant that they should not place him in the position of any tribal chief, or indeed in the place of a king. He derived his authority from the fact that he was a prophet and a messenger of God. They were to address him acknowledging that fact. Amir ibn al-Tufail, however, had a different objective. He said to his friend Arbad ibn Qais, "When we sit with that man, I will try to distract him to give you a chance to hit him with your sword." When they met the Prophet and discussed with him the purpose of their visit, Amir told him that he wanted to speak to him privately. The Prophet said, "Not until you have declared that you believe in God's oneness." Amr repeated his request again, and the Prophet reiterated that condition. As that discussion went on between the Prophet and Amr, the latter waited for his friend Arbad to hit the Prophet with his sword. Arbad made no move. Amr then said to the Prophet, "I will offer you one of three possibilities. You rule over the town of people, and I over the desert people. Or I will be your successor, or I will raise the Ghatafan against you, mobilizing thousands of horsemen." The Prophet rejected all three, and the delegation soon left. Amr said to Arbad, the brave, fearless fighter who was supposed to kill the Prophet, "Confound you, Arbad! Why have you not done as I told you? I never feared a man on the face of the earth as I used to fear you. By God, I will never have any fear of you henceforth." Arbad said, "Do not blame me. Every time I was about to do as you said, I saw you in between him and me. If I lifted my sword, I would have hit you. Would you have liked me to hit you with my sword?" As they left, the Prophet prayed to God to spare him the designs of Amr ibn al-Tufail. When the delegation were on their way back, Amr contracted some illness in his neck and quickly died as he was being nursed in the house of a woman from the tribe of Salul. When the remaining delegation arrived back at their dwellings, their people came to them to inquire about their mission. They spoke to Arbad and asked him what the Prophet said to him. His answer was, "He asked me to worship someone whom I would love to have in front of me now so that I could hit him with my arrows and kill him." Only a day or two later, he left home leading a camel. Soon, a thunderstorm was building up and he was hit by a thunderbolt which burnt him together with his camel. A friendly delegation. A delegation with a different attitude was that of the tribe of Abd al-Qas. When they arrived, the Prophet asked them which tribe they came from. They answered, "We are from Rabia." That was the name of the main tribe of which the Abd al-Qas formed a clan. The Prophet said to them, "Welcome to the delegation who will suffer no humiliation and have no regrets." Their attitude was one of loyalty to the Prophet right from the beginning. It is reported that the Prophet was talking to his companions earlier and said to them, "A group of travelers will come from this direction, and they are the best people from the east." Umar went out in that direction to receive them. He met a group of 13 travelers who told him that they belonged to the tribe of Abd al-Qas. When he asked whether they had come for trade, they answered in the negative. He told them that the Prophet had spoken highly of them a short while earlier. He walked with them until they arrived at the spot where the Prophet was. Umar pointed him out to them, and they quickly dismounted and went directly towards him. Some of them walked, some ran. They kissed the Prophet's hand. One man, known as Al-Ashaj, that is, the man with a cut in his forehead, was left behind. He took care of their camels and put on clean clothes before coming towards the Prophet and kissing his hand. The Prophet said to him, "You have two qualities which God and His Messenger love, patience and forbearance." The man asked the Prophet whether they were acquired by him or God had made him so. The Prophet answered that he was born with them. The man said, "Praise be to God, who has created me with those two qualities loved by God and His Messenger." The delegation had no doubts about what course to take. They were Muslims before they came. They asked the Prophet to teach them something which was sufficient for them to conduct their lives on Islamic principles and to ensure that God would be pleased with them and admit them into heaven. The Prophet said, "I command you to do 4 things and forbid you 4 others. I command you to believe in God alone. Do you know what believing in God means? It is to declare that there is no deity other than God and that Muhammad, peace be upon him, is God's messenger. To attend regularly to prayers, to pay the purifying alms, that is zakat, to fast in the month of Ramadan, and to give 1/5 of the spoils of war to the Islamic State." He also forbade them the use of 4 types of containers which were used to make intoxicant drinks. One of them was called nakir. They were certain that it was not known in the heartland of Arabia. Their tribe lived in the eastern area, which used to be called Bahrain. When the Prophet mentioned it, they asked him whether he knew what it was. He said, It is made of the trunk of a tree in which you open a hole. You put dates in it, pour water over it, and boil it. When it has cooled, you drink it. It has such an effect on you that one of you may hit his cousin with his sword." The Prophet mentioned this because he knew that the delegation included a man who had been hit with a sword by his cousin. He was trying to hide his injury from the Prophet. The delegation also included a man called Al-Jarud ibn Bishr, who was a Christian. He said to the Prophet, "Messenger of God, I have been following a religion which I am now abandoning in order to follow your faith. Do you guarantee me your faith?" The Prophet said, "Yes, indeed. I guarantee you that what I am calling you to believe in is better than your present faith." The man declared his acceptance of Islam. He proved that he was firm in his faith. After the Prophet's death, many of his people reverted to their pagan religion. He, however, stood firm and addressed his people, "I declare that there is no deity except God, the one God who has no partners, and I declare that Muhammad, peace be upon him, is his servant and messenger. He who does not believe in that is an unbeliever." Dialogue with a wise Bedouin. Damam ibn Talaba, a Bedouin from the tribe of Sa'd ibn Bakr, was a man with a straightforward approach. The companions of the Prophet were delighted with any wise Bedouin who came to the Prophet and put his questions to him. Such questions were normally of great value because the Prophet realized that he had to give his interlocutor satisfying answers which combined a direct approach and a precise mode of expression. Damam was a unique example of such people. When he arrived in Medina, he went straight to the mosque and dismounted from his camel at the doorstep. He tied up his camel and went in to find the Prophet sitting there with a number of his companions. The Prophet's companions looked up to find out who was that rough man with thick hair approaching them. As he drew close to them, he said, "Which of you is the son of Abdul Muttalib?" Abdul Muttalib was the Prophet's grandfather. It was customary in Arabia to address a man as the son of his grandfather. The Prophet answered him, "I am his son." Then there followed this remarkable conversation between the man and the Prophet. Damam, "Muhammad, peace be upon him." The Prophet, "Yes." Damam, "Son of Abdul Muttalib, I am going to put some questions to you, but I will be hard on you. Do not be angry with me." The Prophet, "I shall not be angry. You may ask whatever you wish." Damam, "I appeal to you by your God, the God of whoever lived before your time, and the God of all those who will live after you. Is it God who has sent you as a messenger to us?" The Prophet, "It is certainly so." Damam, "I appeal to you by God, your God and the God of those who lived before you, and the God of those who will live after you. Is it God who has commanded you to tell us that we must worship Him alone, without associating any partners with Him, and to disown those partners worshipped by our forefathers?" The Prophet, "Yes, indeed." Damam, "I appeal to you by God, your God, and the God of those who lived before you, and the God of those who will live after you. Has God ordered you that we must pray those 5 prayers every day?" The Prophet, "Yes." Damam, "I appeal to you by God. Has God ordered you to take a portion of the money of the rich among us in order to pay it to our poor?" The Prophet, "Yes, indeed." Damam, "I appeal to you by God. Has God ordered you and us to fast this month in every 12 months? The Prophet, "Yes, indeed." Damam, "I appeal to you by God. Has God ordered you that those of us who can afford it must make the pilgrimage to the house?" The Prophet, "Yes, indeed." Damam, "I declare that there is no deity save God, and I also declare that Muhammad, peace be upon him, is God's messenger. I will certainly fulfill those duties and refrain from what you have forbidden me. I will not add anything to them, and I will omit nothing from them." Damam went straight back to his camel and rode away. The Prophet said to his companions, "If that man with 2 plaits of hair honors his pledge, he will be admitted into heaven." Umar ibn al-Khattab later commented, "I've never seen anyone who put his questions more precisely and concisely than Damam ibn Talaba." Damam went straight to his people. When they saw him, they gathered round him to listen to the outcome of his mission. His first words were, Al-Lat and Al-Uzza are worthless. To start by declaring that the two main idols worshipped in Arabia were worthless was a shock to his people. They counseled him against using such words, lest the two idols punish him. They told him that he might be struck by leprosy or madness. He said, "They certainly cannot do anybody any harm or good. God has sent a messenger and revealed to him his teachings in order to save you from your erring ways. I declare that there is no deity save God, the one God who has no partners, and I declare that Muhammad, peace be upon him, is God's servant and messenger. I have come back to you with the details of what God has ordered you and what he has forbidden you." By evening, all the people of the tribe of Sa'd ibn Bakr, men and women, were Muslims. Ibn Abbas declares that Damam ibn Talaba was the best delegate who ever came to the Prophet. That was a successful mission by a man who sought the truth and abided by it when he learnt it. He approached his mission squarely, dealt with it fairly, and acted on its results responsibly. A delegation including a liar. Another delegation arrived in Medina sent by the tribe of Hanifa from Yamama, a remote area of Arabia. That was a large delegation which included a man called Musaylama. Apparently, Musaylama was a man of ambition. He used to say to his people that if Muhammad, peace be upon him, could make him his successor, he would follow him. The Prophet never gave such a position to anyone. When the delegation arrived in Medina, they left Musaylama to guard their camels and property and went to the Prophet. After their detailed discussions with the Prophet, they accepted Islam and pledged their loyalty to him. They also told him of Musaylama being left to guard their property. The Prophet ordered that he should be given his share of gifts in equal measure to what he had given to every member of the delegation. He also commented, "The man is none the worse for being in his position." By this, the Prophet meant that it was not a dishonor for the man to be left behind in order to guard the property of his people. When the delegation went back to their quarters in Yamama, Musaylama claimed that he was a prophet. He told his people that he was given an equal share of prophethood with Muhammad, peace be upon him. He said to the members of the delegation, "Did he not tell you when you mentioned me to him that I was none the worse for being left behind? He certainly did know that I was his partner." Musaylama also claimed to have received revelations from God. He used to repeat a few rhyming phrases which were indeed laughable. He told his people that he cancelled the prohibition of intoxicants and adultery. He also told them not to pray. He continued, however, to speak of the Prophet as a messenger of God. He simply wanted to be treated on an equal footing. His tribesmen followed him. Another report suggests that Musaylama met the Prophet before the Hanifa delegation went back. He apparently asked the Prophet to give him some position of honor. The Prophet told him that he would not give him even a piece of wood. He told him that he could not run away from God's will. The Prophet also mentioned to him that he had a certain dream, and he supposed that he was the man concerned with that dream. Ibn Abbas reports that he inquired about the statement of the Prophet about his dream, and that Abu Huraira, another companion of the Prophet, told him that God's messenger said, "As I was asleep, I saw myself wearing 2 gold bracelets on my hand. Gold is forbidden to Muslim men. I was troubled to see them on my hand. On inspiration in my dream, I blew them and they flew into the air. I interpreted them as 2 liars who would make their claims at a later stage. Here they are now. One of them is from the Ans in Sana'a. The other is Musaylama, the liar from Yamama." This hadith is related by Al-Bukhari and Muslim. Musaylama managed to gather a large force around him. A battle raged between him and the forces of Islam after the Prophet's death, in which he was killed. He certainly caused a great deal of trouble for a period of time shortly before the Prophet passed away and in the early days of the reign of Abu Bakr. Christian consultations at Najran. In the south of Arabia and a short distance to the north of the Yemen lies the city of Najran. At the time of the Prophet, Najran and its surrounding area was a Christian valley. It had a bishop called Abu Haritha ibn Alqama from the tribe of Bakr ibn Wa'il. He was considered an authority on the Christian faith. He was in touch with the Byzantine emperors who respected him, sent him financial aid, and helped build a number of churches in the area. When the conflict in Arabia moved strongly in favor of the Muslims, the Prophet sent a letter to the Bishop of Najran which read, "In the name of God, worshipped by Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, peace be upon them, I call on you to worship God alone and not to worship anyone alongside him. And I call on you to give your loyalty only to God rather than to any of his servants. Should you refuse, you have to pay jizya, a tax denoting loyalty and entitling the people who pay it to be protected by the Muslim state. Should you also refuse that, I will declare war against you." When the bishop read that letter from the Prophet, he felt that the matter was very serious indeed. He was very much perturbed. He summoned a man called Shurabil ibn Wada'a, a man of sound judgment who was always called for consultation whenever a problem arose. None of the important people of Najran was called before him. When he arrived, the bishop gave him the Prophet's letter to read. Then he asked him, "Abu Maryam, what do you say?" Shurabil answered, "You know what God has promised Abraham about sending a messenger from the children of Ishmael, peace be upon them. You cannot rule out the fact that this man may be that messenger. I have no opinion or judgment concerning prophethood. Had it been a matter of this world, I would have given you my opinion and I would have considered it carefully." The bishop asked him to sit aside. He then called in other people for consultation. Abdullah ibn Shurabil from the tribe of Asba and Jabbar ibn Fad from the tribe of Al-Harith. Their opinion was exactly the same as that of Shurabil ibn Wada'a. When the bishop considered that, he decided to call a public meeting. Church bells rang to announce to the people that a serious matter needed to be considered. People from all over the valley assembled to find out what was happening. There were 73 villages in that valley which could raise over 100,000 fighters. The bishop read the Prophet's letter to the meeting and asked them for their opinion. They agreed to send a delegation of 60 people to Medina, headed by 3 men first consulted and including leading figures who held official positions in order to get first-hand information about the Prophet. When the delegation arrived in Medina, they changed into their best garments, which were made of silk. They also put on gold rings. They greeted the Prophet, but he did not reply. They tried to speak to him, but he would not answer. Amazed at his behavior, they went about looking for 2 of the Prophet's companions, Uthman ibn Affan and Abdurrahman ibn Auf, who were well known to them. Both were traders who used to have some business with Najran. They found them in the company of a number of Muslims from the Muhajirin and the Ansar. They told them that the Prophet wrote them a letter and they came in response, but he would neither reply to their greetings nor speak to them. They asked them whether they should return home. Uthman and Abdurrahman asked Ali ibn Abi Talib, the Prophet's cousin and son-in-law, what he felt about this. Ali answered, "I feel that they should take off those garments and gold rings and change back into their traveling clothes before coming to the Prophet again." The Najran delegation with the Prophet. When they acted on Ali's suggestion, the Prophet returned their greetings and spoke to them in his friendly manner. Their discussion with the Prophet in the mosque took quite a long time. When it was time for their evening prayer, they prepared to pray, but some of the Prophet's followers wanted to prevent them from doing so. The Prophet ordered them to let the Najran people offer their normal prayer. The discussion was resumed afterwards, and it took a long while. They eventually asked the Prophet, "What do you say about Jesus? Since we are Christians, we would love to know your opinion so that we may be able to tell our people." The Prophet said, "I have nothing to say about him today. You have to stay until I can tell you what will be said to me about Jesus, peace be upon him." Next morning, the Prophet received fresh Quranic revelations which stated, Jesus, peace be upon him, in God's view, is the same as Adam, peace be upon him, whom he had created from dust and said to him, "Be," and he was there. This is the truth from your Lord. Be not therefore one of the doubters. Should anyone argue with you about him after what has been given to you of true knowledge, say to them, let us call in our children and your children, our women and your women, and ourselves and yourselves. Let us then all pray God and ask that God's curse overwhelm the liars. 3:59-61. When the Prophet told the Najran delegation the following day what information he had received about Jesus, peace be upon him, they refused to accept it. The Prophet then offered them the challenge which was outlined in the Quranic verses quoted above. It was a serious challenge. It meant for the Najran people that they risked being cursed by a prophet and a messenger of God. Such a prospect was not to be trifled with. The following morning the prophet came bringing with him his 2 grandchildren, Hassan and Hussein. His daughter Fatima was walking behind him. He also had several wives at that time. When the Najran people saw them, Shurabil ibn Wada felt that the matter was coming to a head. He said to his fellow leaders of the delegation, Abdullah ibn Shurabil and Jabbar ibn Faid, "The 2 of you know that our valley would not accept any opinion other than mine. I feel that the matter is very serious indeed. Should this man be a king, and should we be the first of the Arabs to reject his authority and challenge him, he will always harbor a grudge against us. He will not stop until he has overwhelmed us. We are not very far away from his land. If he is truly a prophet and a messenger of God and we exchange curses with him, doom will befall us until the last hair and the last nail." The 2 men rejoined, "What do you say then? You do not have an easy way out there." Shurabil said, "My opinion is that we accept his judgment. I can see in him a man who is a model of fairness and justice." The 2 men accepted Shurabil's idea. When Shurabil was face to face with the prophet, he said to him, "I have come upon something better than exchanging curses with you." When the prophet asked him what that was, Shurabil answered, "I will give you the whole day till the evening and the whole night till the morning to give your verdict in our case. Whatever you judge is acceptable." The prophet said to him, "There may be some people back home who would blame you for this." Shurabil suggested that the prophet should ask his 2 companions about his standing among his people. They told the prophet that the whole valley accepted nobody's opinion except that of Shurabil. The prophet remarked, "Well judged by someone who rejects the faith." Najran's offer to accept the prophet's judgment without question, giving him 24 hours to make it known to them, meant that they wanted a peace treaty with the prophet and left it to him to specify the terms of that treaty, promising to accept those terms whatever they were. They relied on what they knew of his absolute fairness. A treaty with Najran. The following day they went to the prophet, who caused the terms of the peace agreement to be written down for them. The agreed provisions were as follows. In the name of God, the merciful, the beneficent. This is what Muhammad, peace be upon him, the prophet and God's messenger, has written down for the people of Najran when he has the authority over all their fruits, gold, silver, crops, and slaves. He has benevolently left them all that in return for 2,000 hullas every year, 1,000 to be given in the month of Rajab and 1,000 in the month of Safar. Each hulla is equal to 1 ounce, a measure equal to 4 dirhams. The Najran are also required to provide accommodation and expenses for my messengers for up to 20 days. None of my messengers shall be kept in Najran more than 1 month. They are also required to give us, as a loan, 30 shields, 30 horses, and 30 camels, in case of any disorder and treachery in Yemen. If anything is lost of the shields, horses, or camels they loan to my messenger, it will remain owing by my messenger until it is given back. Najran has the protection of God and the pledges of Muhammad, peace be upon him, the prophet, to protect their lives, faith, land, property, those who are absent and those who are present, and their clan and allies. They need not change anything of their past customs. No right of theirs or their religion shall be altered. No bishop, monk, or church guard shall be removed from his position. Whatever they have is theirs, no matter how big or small. They are not held in suspicion, and they shall suffer no vengeance killing. They are not required to be mobilized, and no army shall trespass on their land. If any of them requests that any right of his should be given to him, justice shall be administered among them. He who takes usury on past loans is not under my protection. No person in Najran is answerable for an injustice committed by another. These were the main provisions of the peace agreement, which was witnessed by Abu Sufyan ibn Harb, Ghiland ibn Amr, Malik ibn Auf, Al-Akra ibn Habis, and Al-Mughira ibn Shuba. When this was done, the Najran delegation returned home. They were met on the way by the bishop and the notables of Najran who had traveled for 1 night in order to meet them. Alongside the bishop was Bishr ibn Muawiyah, also known as Abu Alqama, who was his half-brother and cousin. The bishop was handed the written peace treaty. As he was reading it, with Abu Alqama on his she-camel alongside him, the camel slipped. In his anger, Bishr said, "Confound that man," meaning the prophet. The bishop said to him, "You have indeed confounded a prophet sent by God." Bishr replied, "Indeed, by God, I shall not get my camel to relax until I have gone to him." He directed his she-camel towards Medina and proceeded to go. The bishop caught up with him and said, "Please understand me. I said this only so that the Arabs would know it. I fear they may say that we have been naive, or that we have given this man what no other tribe has given him, while we are the strongest and the most powerful among them." Bishr said to him, "By God, I shall never forgive you for what you have said." He drove his camel fast, leaving the bishop behind. He went straight to the Prophet and declared his acceptance of Islam. He stayed in Medina until he died as a martyr in one of the battles fighting for the cause of Islam. The delegation then went to the city of Najran, where they were received by the rest of the people. A short while later, they visited a monk called Ibn Abi Shamr al-Zubaydi. He was at the top of his monastery. They gave him an account of the contacts between Najran and the Prophet, since the Prophet first wrote to the bishop. They also told him of what caused Bishr, the bishop's brother, to leave for Medina after the bishop had stated that Muhammad, peace be upon him, was a prophet. The monk was excited and wanted to get down. He said to them, "Unless you let me out, I will throw myself from the top of this monastery." He carried a present and went to the Prophet. His present included a garment which continued to be worn by caliphs long after the Prophet had passed away. The monk stayed in Medina for some time, listening to the Quranic revelations, learning about Islamic practices, obligations, and punishments for crimes and sins. However, he did not declare his acceptance of Islam. He sought the Prophet's permission to go back home and said, "I have some business to do and I shall come back, God willing." However, he did not go back to Medina during the lifetime of the Prophet. It is useful to mention here that should a follower of an earlier religion state that Muhammad, peace be upon him, is a prophet or a messenger of God, his statement does not bring him into the fold of Islam. This statement is not sufficient to make him a Muslim. What it signifies is that the man knows that Muhammad, peace be upon him, is a messenger of God, but to be a Muslim is much more than mere knowledge, even when it is expressed in words and statements. To be a Muslim is to believe in God's oneness and in the message of Muhammad, peace be upon him, and to accept that in practice, making obedience to God and to the Prophet in public and in private one's way of life. The story of the Najran people is not complete unless one also mentions a later episode when the Prophet sent his military commander Khalid ibn al-Walid to the tribe of Al-Harith ibn Ka'b in Najran. The Prophet ordered Khalid to call on those people to accept Islam and to give them a period of 3 days to make up their minds. If they accepted Islam, Khalid was to accept that from them. If they refused, he would fight them. When Khalid arrived there, he sent his emissaries all over the place calling on the people to accept Islam. They did so without much hesitation. Khalid stayed there for some time to teach the people how to live according to Islam. He wrote to the Prophet about the results of his mission, and the Prophet wrote back asking him to return to Medina, bringing a delegation from that tribe. When they arrived in Medina and spoke to the Prophet, he asked them, "How did you achieve your victories in pre-Islamic days?" They said, "We used to stick together and allow nothing to divide us into groups. We also never started any injustice." The Prophet said, "You are telling the truth." He appointed Qubais ibn al-Husayn as a leader of that tribe.